In the next few modules, we're going to talk about what we call space management. Basically, it means keeping the proper amount of space between you and other cars. And that's important because it really helps avoid contact between cars. If you don't know, contact between cars is what we call a crash. So the question is, just how much space is enough space? Well, check out behind me. That clearly is not enough space between two cars that are moving at 50 miles an hour. Although, it might be enough space between two cars that are stopped. So, it's important to realize that when you first start driving, knowing how much space to put between cars can be a difficult thing to figure out. And it's based on a couple of things, like how fast you're going, the size of the road, weather, road conditions, and the amount of traffic that's out there. When we look at space management, we actually look at a lot of things. Following distance is an obvious one. But we also want to make sure that we give enough space on our sides, that we stay in our lane. And we want to make sure that we know how closely other cars are following us. Someone follows us too closely, we do the wrong thing, they do the wrong thing, again, a crash. Now, since we're all sharing the road together, we want to make sure that others out there that are driving around us, well, they know what it is that we're intending to do. And we do that through a series of signals. Signals like hazard lights, the horn, headlights, fog lights. Believe it or not, even your body language can tell something about what your intentions are, and it can affect space management. The next couple of modules will give you some idea on how much space is enough space. And it'll also teach you how to signal to others. So go ahead, click on the next couple of videos.
Hi, my name is Juan Baboon. And I am from Honduras, Central America. I've been working with the Ford Driving Skills for Life program for the last 7 years. I'm going to talk to you about how much distance is safe for following another vehicle. We're going to talk about it because rear-end collisions are the most common type of vehicle crash. The basic rules are these. 1. The faster you're going, the further behind another vehicle you will need to be. 2. The 3-second rule works well. For speeds above 40, and below 40, the 2-second rule works well. What does that mean? It means staying the proper distance behind the car in front of you. For example, the 3-second rule means that you want to be 3 seconds behind the car in front of you. As you drive down the road, pick a spot by the side of the road that the car in front of you passes. If you follow the 3-second rule properly, it should take you 3 seconds before you pass that same spot. Make sense? What you'll find is that as traffic flow goes faster, that 3-second rule will translate to a longer and longer following distance. So, why do we need to worry about following distance? And why do we need to manage our space? Because driving should be a non-contact endeavor, and because speed, space, and time are all interrelated. In this case, the faster you're going, the less time you will have to react. Therefore, more space you will need. Pretty simple concept, right? Then why do people insist on following right behind another car at 65 miles per hour on the freeway? Because they don't manage their space well. And why don't they manage their space well? Because it is a choice based on things like not knowing how much space is safe, not caring, or not thinking that anything's going to happen because nothing has happened before. There are all kinds of reasons why choices are made. However, that doesn't change the fact that managing your space is a critical part of driving. It keeps you safe and those around you safe.
Oh, hey, how's it going? It's Mike again. I'm going to talk to you this time about what we call outward intentions. I think you kind of saw I was just giving somebody some outward intentions there. And the problem with driving on the street is that, well, it kind of gets to be the same old thing pretty much all the time, and that happens pretty quickly. Now, if we end up driving the same route to school or work every day, we get really used to what we're going to do, and when we're going to do it. Like, which street we're going to turn on, which driveway we're going to turn into, stuff like that. And we even begin to think that other people around us know what it is that we're about to do as well. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. And since we're all out there driving 3,000-pound cars that are in motion, it's a good idea to make sure that people know what it is that you're about to do with your car. So there are lots of ways to signal other drivers. Some of them are good, and well, some of them aren't so good. We're going to stick with the good ones. In the end, we use those signals for outward intentions for safety and for courtesy. The first signal should be pretty obvious. This thing right over here, it's what we call a turn signal. It tells people if we're turning left or right, which direction we're turning in and which lane we want to go to. It just lets other people know what we're intending. And even though you might not think other people are paying attention, you'd be surprised how effective those signals really are. The next one is right over here, at least in this car, and it's what we call the hazard signal. It turns on all 4 of our signal flashers. We use this one in the event that we're having a problem, like, maybe we've got a flat tire or some other mechanical problem that forces us to pull over and stop. It just lets people know that we're planning on stopping and that we are stopped. It can also use it for some other reason, like if we have to go a lot slower on the road than the posted limit, or if we want to make ourselves more visible from behind when visibility is bad, like in a dust storm or heavy fog or a rainstorm or even a blizzard. Okay, so the next thing is headlights, and typically they aren't really used to show what you intend, but it's good to know a couple things about them. First off, in areas where you're around other cars, you want to use your low beams, which is what the car will be set to when you just turn the lights on. However, if you're on a desolate road with no street lamps or anything, and you need to light up your path a little bit more, you can use what we call the high beams. And if you look over here, they're actually on the turn signal stock, and you could pull that toward you. That's what turns on those high beams. Now, they're called high beams because the bulbs are actually pointed up slightly, and they cast light further down the road, and they also have a wider beam. Now, while you'll be able to see further, you'll also be shining light right at the cars that are approaching you. Often, those people will flash their lights at you, to let you know that you're blinding them. Check your dash to make sure you haven't inadvertently left the high beams on. There's usually a little blue signal that'll show you that your high beams are on. Now, another area where you want to avoid using the high beams is in fog or snow. Using the high beams in those instances will bounce the light right back at you, and you won't be able to see any further down the road. So, to help out with that, some cars are equipped with driving or fog lights, and they help out quite a bit. Those lights are actually lower, and they cast light under the fog. Remember that letting other drivers and pedestrians know what your intentions are is important, and it's really easy to do. So in this module, we're going to talk about braking. Now, there are lots of misunderstandings as to when you can and can't use the brake. But we find that generally it's really more a matter of how you use the brake that really determines if you're going to have a problem or not. Well, for example, lots of people will tell you that you should never use the brake if the car's sliding, or if the car's on ice, or if you have half the car on a high grip surface, like dry pavement, and half the car on a low grip surface like dirt or dust. Well, as it turns out, many times it's actually okay to use the brake. The how in terms of using the brake has a lot to do with how you feel at that particular moment. Now, look at it this way. If you're sliding down the road toward traffic and traffic stopped, you're going to need to reduce your speed. You don't have a whole lot of choice, which means you're going to have to use the brake. However, at that moment, you're probably going to be scared. I mean, I know I would be. Because of that, you'll probably end up hammering the brake pedal, which, believe it or not, could actually make things worse. Now, on the other hand, if you can be smooth and precise with the pedal, even though you're fighting that tendency to panic, then you can add lighter pressure and gradually reduce your speed without causing more problems. Now, the real question is, will you be able to do that? Honestly, probably not. At least not when you first start driving. It'll be hard for you to know just how much pressure you can add without unbalancing the car any further. And really, you won't even be thinking about that. In a panic situation, you'll probably just be panicking. And that's exactly why people will tell you to stay off the brake when the car is sliding in the first place. They're just assuming that you're going to hammer the brake pedal because of panic. Now, it's not just people that show you how to drive that know this. Believe it or not, it's also the manufacturers that know this, and they develop all kinds of safety systems that can help us with braking. They kind of augment our skill. They're driver aids. One of those systems is what we call ABS, which you've probably heard of before, and it stands for Anti-Lock Braking System. Now, the cool thing about ABS is that it helps us to prevent the problems that can take place when we panic. Now, it doesn't necessarily allow you to stop faster, and ABS is not infallible. No safety system is, but it definitely helps. It also helps if you know how it works. ABS is just a sensor system. You don't have to turn it on or turn any switches or anything like that. It's always ready to go. Now, the system engages when it determines that you've added so much brake pressure to the brake pedal that it would probably result in the tires locking up. They stop rolling. Now, this would be bad because the tires really need to be rolling to be able to give you the best grip and to allow the car to go in the direction that you point it. So really, ABS is kind of a safety net. It allows us the luxury, and believe me, it is a luxury, of, oh my gosh, panic brake pressure, while still allowing us to turn and get the car to go where we want it to go. That's why we actually sometimes call ABS the ability to brake and steer system. When the ABS system is active, you'll feel a little pulsation in the pedal, or sometimes you'll hear the tires chirping. But other than that, you might not even know that it's working. Sometimes the pedal pulsation makes people think, that they've done something wrong. But don't worry. You haven't broken the car. You haven't hurt it. Don't take your foot off the pedal just because you feel the feedback. And remember, ABS doesn't do the braking for you. If you want the car to still slow down, you still have to keep the pedal down. The final thing, ABS is not magic. It can only work with the traction that is available between the tire and the road, that area that we call the contact patch. It has to operate within the laws of physics. If you're on a sheet of ice with zero traction, zero friction, ABS can't do much for you. In that scenario, you've already probably made a mistake by misreading the pavement. So, look, decrease your speed when conditions look bad, and this will increase your chances of getting wherever you want to go without problems. Remember that if you do run into problems, there are often ways to get out of them if you do the right thing.
Hi, my name is Joe Williams. I've been with Driving Skills for Life for 10 years, and I've been a race driver and a driver coach for many years. I'm going to talk to you about what you can do to make sure that if you need to stop quickly, you can do it efficiently. The first thing to understand is exactly what takes up the distance of braking. Think about it. Driving along with your foot on the gas, and suddenly you need to brake. Does a car slow down right then and there? No. First, you have to realize that you need to brake, and that part is based on reaction times. So let's say that you have killer reaction time, and you can react within a half a second. Something you absolutely will not be able to do if you're distracted because you're, let's say, texting. Next, you have to take your foot off the gas, and then you have to put your foot on the brake. Pretty simple and obvious, but what isn't obvious is the time it will take to get that done. Let's say you're really fast, and you're able to get it done in 0.4 of a second. Well, good job. So now, before the car has really started to slow down effectively, you've used up 0.9 of a second. It doesn't sound like much, does it? Well, it isn't. I mean, a second is not much time at all, but remember that the car is still traveling down the road during that time. How far it goes is based on your speed. Okay, so you're cruising along at 45 miles per hour, and all of a sudden you realize that the light signal just turned from yellow to red. How far will you travel before you can bring the car to a stop? Luckily, it's dry out. You've got that going for you.
But at 45 miles per hour, you're traveling at roughly 66 feet per second, which means that by the time you actually depress the brake, the car has already traveled about 60 feet. That's the length of 4 cars parked nose to tail. But hang on, you haven't actually stopped yet. You've just started the process of slowing down. The average car is going to take somewhere around 100 feet on a dry surface to stop once you hit the brake from 45 miles per hour. That's a total of 160 feet in good conditions. That is a lot further than most people think. And remember that cars in the intersection aren't your only worry. You have to worry about people in the crosswalks too. Will you stop in time? Who knows? Hopefully you have 160 feet. The next question is, how can we reduce that distance? The obvious answer is to be really focused on your driving and try and know what is coming up. It is one of those choices type things. Choosing to focus on what is happening pays big dividends. Choosing to text or be distracted can end up in a crash. So focusing is good. The other thing you can do is called covering the brake pedal. Basically it means your foot off the gas pedal as you approach the intersection. Just to be ready, having your foot cover the brake pedal until you know you can accelerate again. It can cut the distance for stopping down by roughly half. One thing that we want to avoid is left foot braking. On a street, especially in a panic scenario, people tend to hit both the brake and the gas pedal together when they adopt left foot braking. So really try to avoid that. The best thing you can do is be aware and ready. And that's probably the hardest part about being a good driver.
Okay, so this will be the last segment on braking. We've talked a lot about braking in general, but we haven't touched on how to threshold brake or brake at the limit of traction with a system that doesn't have the benefit of ABS. Almost every car on the road now has ABS, but there are some older models still out there that aren't equipped with that system. As a driver, you need to know what to do in the event that you have to brake at the limit with your car. First off, you should find out if your car has ABS or not, and you should know that with any car that you get in. A quick look at the owner's manual will tell you yay or nay on that question. Next, you need to know that ABS and non-ABS equipped cars will do pretty much the same thing pretty much all the time when using the brakes, except when you're braking at the limit of grip, which can happen on slick roads and when you panic. When you exceed the limit of grip under braking, there's a good chance that you will stop the tires from moving. This is what many people call locked up tires or locked up brakes. The problem with this is that when the tires, especially the front ones, aren't rotating, they won't respond to any steering inputs. This could be really scary because if you can't stop before hitting something and you turn the wheel and the car keeps going straight, well, you're going to probably hit whatever it is in front of you. That would be bad. So, knowing this, it's smart to increase your following distance if you are in a car that doesn't have ABS. That way, you'll be less likely to need to hammer the brake pedal with enough force to put your foot through the floorboard. However, if you do find yourself in a situation where you have added pressure and the tires have locked and you need to turn, or you can feel the rear of the car beginning to come around, you're going to need to get those tires rolling again. You will need to reduce brake pressure, but you will also need to keep slowing the car. Sounds really, really easy. It's really, really not. Some people call it pumping the brake, but it is actually way more subtle than that. It's a gradual reduction and then increase, and then reduction and then increase in brake pressure to help keep the tires rolling while still steering the car. On the other hand, big pumping motions on the brake can actually lead to more instability and decrease in the rate of acceleration. The problem is being subtle with the brake pedal when you're panicking is really tough. That's why ABS was introduced in the first place. Learn your car, understand where those braking limits are, and plan accordingly. If all else fails, use that subtle motion on and off the pedal.
In this segment, we're going to talk about car communication, car feel, and vehicle handling. Car communication is what takes place when the car is trying to tell you that something is going on that it needs your help with. Generally, a car isn't going to communicate with you much unless something is wrong. Now the thing is, cars don't really speak your language. They really aren't verbal, but they still do communicate. They communicate through sliding or slipping, and they let you know they are doing that through the feeling in the seat and in the steering wheel. When a car is handling well, it will do all the things that you ask it to do, like slow down, speed up, or turn. But when the car is struggling to handle, it won't do those things well. It's not really the car that is struggling to handle, it's really the tires, because the tires are what provide the friction to do everything that we want a car to do. If the friction isn't there, then the tires lose grip and the car begins to slide. Let's take a closer look at the tire and how it works. The only part of the tire that does anything for us is the part that is actually touching the ground. We call this area the contact patch, where it makes contact with the ground. Pretty simple stuff. And the wider the tire, the more contact it has with the road and the more friction it develops. Basically, though, most tires have a contact patch about the size of a piece of notebook paper. Now, tires change while they are on the car and while you are in motion. This is because tires are like balloons. They are filled with air, and as you drive, you shift weight or load in the car. Think of it this way. When you brake, everyone in the car moves forward. Well, so does the weight of the car. That's why cars dip in the front end under hard braking. The reason this is important is because you are putting more weight on those balloons at the front of the car. We call this weight transfer or load transfer. With more weight, the front tires will flatten out and form larger contact patches. That means that the front of the car now has more traction and can do more work. The rear of the car, though, will be in just the opposite situation. So what you do while driving can affect the grip level of the tires from front to rear and side to side. Remember also, the tires have a limited amount of total traction and therefore a limited amount of work that they can do. The more aggressively you drive, the more work you are asking of the tires. With that in mind, be smooth with the controls is what lets you stay in control. Tires tend to produce the most friction when it's dry and start to lose the potential for friction as the road gets wet or has sand or dust covering it, or snow, and of course ice. If you drive aggressively on that type of surface, or if you simply find yourself needing to slow down quickly, speed up quickly, or turn abruptly, the tires may not have enough friction to do that work, and they will begin to slip. Right then, the car is in what we call a slide. We have to know something about vehicle handling to control it.
So basically, there are a couple of types of slides a car can go through. If the front of the car slides, come on over and check it out. Which is when we try to turn the wheel and the car keeps going straight, we call that understeer. It's actually pretty hard to feel, but it's really easy to fix. All you have to do is slow the car down a little bit. Now, when you slow the car down, you end up doing two things. One, obviously, you reduce the speed, which helps the tires because it reduces the workload. And you also transfer weight forward, which gives those front tires the traction they need to help you turn. Now, you only want to transfer the load that you need. So, depending on how bad the slide is, you might just need to take your foot off the gas, or you might have to go as far as using some brake pressure if the slide is worse. Understeer is way more common than you might think, but since it's really hard to feel, people never really consider it a slide. Now, the other type of slide is when the rear of the car slides, and we call it oversteer. So let's go check it out. Now, there are other terms for oversteer. Some people call it skidding or sliding. Really, it doesn't much matter what you call it. The key here is that you've got to be able to control it, because oversteer can easily lead to the car crashing. You've probably been taught to do things like, turn into the slide and stay off the brake when the car's in oversteer. And while that is generally really good information, it'll really be hard to think about that when the slide happens. So really what we're going to do is just focus on two main things with the slide: feel and vision. In order to control oversteer, first of all, you've got to be able to feel it. You have to be able to know that it's happening, and it really should be very easy to feel. Some people even consider it scary, especially when that oversteer comes up on you by surprise. Now, the other reason that oversteer can be scary is when you realize that if you don't do something about that oversteer, you're going to end up facing oncoming traffic. Never a good thing. While feeling the slide and knowing it's happening is the easy part of oversteer control, the next step isn't so easy. Sounds easy, but it's not. You've got to be able to look exactly where you want the car to go. Not necessarily where the car is going, but where you want the car to go. Why is it so important to do that? Well, because chances are when the car begins to oversteer, you're going to either panic or you're going to be very, very close to it. Now, because of that, your body and your mind will be in an athletic mode, and wherever you look, boom, is exactly where you're going to turn the wheel and exactly where you're going to end up going. If you look in the right place, you'll end up turning the wheel into the slide without ever even thinking about it. Wow, that sounds easy, you say. Just look where you want the car to go when it's sliding and I'll be fine. How hard can that be? Well, actually, it can be pretty tough. People look at the wrong thing when the car slides all the time. And they actually end up not losing control of the car. They control it, but they control it right at the wrong thing. Things like telephone poles, trees, other cars, curbs, even people. The faster the car's moving when the slide takes place, the more likely you are to panic. The deeper that panic is, the more likely you will be to stare at exactly what you don't want to hit. It's actually, believe it or not, a pretty normal response. The problem is it's not a good response. And the faster you're moving when the slide takes place, the less time and space you have to control the car, and the faster and harder you're going to hit whatever target it is you end up staring at. It's one of those things where people, they just don't believe it's going to go down that way until it actually does. But at that point, it's just too late. Look, teaching you how to control oversteer is the easy part. But our goal is that hopefully you never have to use this skill on the street. See, we want you to be able to make the right choices about how you drive on the street so that you'll go at a speed that is reasonable, or so that you'll be concentrating enough to have the situational awareness to realize that there may be ice on the road, or that rain and sand and dust can lead you to getting into a situation where the car begins sliding. Remember, it's all about the choices that you make.